Hello everyone. Well, Ashkonda here, and today in another episode of my trips and travels and journal. That's the best I got now. We're gonna talk about my trip to Sharivka or Sharovka or a great estate not far from Kharkiv, Ukraine. So, Kharkiv, I already made a video about it, and this has been the city where I spent quite some years of my life already. And, you know, once you are familiar with the place where you live in, you start to wonder what's happening around, what's in the region. And one of the main sites that are around Kharkiv and not far from it is exactly this estate. And I first heard of it a few years ago. Pretty much, it seemed to be like the whole place was starting to become more and more popular in terms of the touristic value around 7 years ago. That was the first time when I heard about it, and the first time when parents and I took a trip there. And because it happened, I think in September, end of September, the weather was still warm, the nature was still there, there was already quite some people, and it seemed like the place that people were talking about was actually quite interesting to visit. And it was great to see that such a landmark is actually not that far from the place when I used to live. That is why, even though, despite the terrible state the estate was in, we actually spent some quality time with my family, which was great. So, it first of all famous not only because of the architecture of the building, which also quite memorable, but also the park that is surrounding it. First of all, there was a famous Linden's Alley where a person who used to own the estate, Leopold Koenig, he was, seems like he was of German descent, and he pretty much was a wealthy person in what used to be a Russian empire back in the end of 19th century. So he actually purchased this whole estate back in the days from just one another rich person who actually built an estate initially, and he modified it and increased it, and actually there was much more territory that was kind of attributable to it. So he also was a huge fan of his wife. He was actually in love with, and she was, according to what the legends are saying, was incredibly beautiful. And one of the favorite trees she had was lindens. That's why he built this beautiful Linden's Alley, and it's still out there. And the trees are now more than 100 years old, so they definitely look nice. Yeah, the whole estate is pretty much noticeable because of the whole vibe that's happening around it, and also this sort of romantic legend that's been in there. As already mentioned, Leopold Koenig, he was a wealthy sugar manufacturer, and there are a few things that he did because of his wife. So he basically bought this estate for his wife. He tried to preserve her in there, as she apparently was suffering from tuberculosis. You know that actually this estate, for a long time after the revolution that happened at the beginning of 20th century, when Soviet party became the main one and there was no Russian Empire anymore but USSR, this place, this estate, became a tuberculosis dispenser, so where all the people suffering from this disease were actually living in and trying to get well. The wife of Leopold Koenig, she was also traveling to the south, to the sea, and usually one of the places of that was Crimea. And apparently, according to the legend, because she was so beautiful and she didn't really like his husband, and she only was with him because of the money. It was like he was literally the sugar daddy, if you know what I mean. He's sugar manufacturer, and you catch my drift, right? So what happened in Crimea is that she fell in love with some young officer, and they fell in love, and they had um, intimacy moments between them, and that was heard by Leopold Koenig from some other people who decided to, of course, mention that to him. And what he did, once his wife got back, he pretty much brought the stone where this officer and his wife had sex and put it in his garden so she would remember how sinful she was. What a beautiful love story, isn't it? So, of course, as all the wealthy people back in the days, he was actually paying well for the architects and designers who were designing the insides of the whole building. And apparently I was surprised by the level of preservation it was. As I already mentioned, pretty much starting from 1917, when Leopold Koenig needed to flee pretty much from Russia back then and to Germany, he just left his estate, which now became a tuberculosis dispenser. And of course, the things that are noticeable for all the people from the former Soviet Union countries, we all would see and notice that this place was legit a hospital. You know, like, apparently there is one wing of this whole estate that literally screams that, oh my god, Soviet Union was in here. So, you know, the paint they were using to paint the walls, they built this stairs that are super common around not only hospitals but also in like the block of flats that people in the USSR will still known nowadays, like for all my compatriots from Ukraine and all the other countries, I believe. So that's already kind of the vibe that you will get if you will go not through the central entrance, as I did the first time when parents and I went there a few years ago. Most of the halls were kind of closed at that time, and actually, like the state of the estate was dreadful. You know, after they actually closed it and moved all the tuberculosis patients from this place, which actually happened only in 2008. Could you believe it? That beautiful place served as a hospital for tuberculosis ill people for almost 100 years. And of course, as happened with most of the state-owned landmarks and things, not all that good with their conditions, let's put it this way. And you know, when we went this time, it was also like not the best weather, let's be honest. Like, it's quite cold, and there's even snow in certain places. But to see that halls which were really like the parts of the hospital, they look terribly, especially probably those which were used in a lot of places. Like there were some rooms that look as gorgeous as they intend to be when they were just built over 100 years ago. Like there is something that now resembles some kind of a library with the great ceiling, and there were some windows in the ceiling, you know, like it's so built in this dark wood. There is also this big hall room when there is also a big mirror, and I remember my mom was like telling me jokes, semi-spooky jokes, that sometimes you may see this wife of Leopold Koenig still strolling around the building. I know back that time when we visited for the first, there were some other people, and we actually had a guide who didn't really tell us anything, just took the money and let us go through all the rooms ourselves pretty much, and there were some other people like us. But now in this quarantine conditions, I wasn't really sure if I was able to go in, but it seemed like the doors were open. So I actually entered, and I was the only person inside. And that was another spooky moment, all the squeaky floors. Even though the places were gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but like it still felt like I'm in this one of the haunted mansions or something. And only the lack of the furniture that kind of was making this whole experience not as immersive. If there would be some more things like with the cobwebs or some other things or some spooky mirrors, a lot of dust, that would be much more fun in terms of the experience, I would say. But hey, at the end of the day, it seemed like they at least did something. Like initially the intention was to actually rebuild this whole, not to rebuild this whole place, but to properly repair it. And apparently it doesn't seem like the regional government found enough money or decided to spend enough money to actually preserve this beautiful landmark. And the conditions it is now, it's just disheartening to see. Like, compared to what it has been 5 years ago, it does seem like they did something, but it's so devastating to see that apparently this money that has been spent on this whole thing is just not enough. And I don't have much hope for this place. I mean, probably hope is the only thing that I have right now, because it's just really sad that places like this, they do exist, and unfortunately, due to apparent reasons, we're not the wealthiest country in this whole world, but it doesn't seem like our heritage is taken real good care of. I don't really know what can help. Maybe some private investors who are really interested in being a huge fan of the place can, I don't know, help to properly maintain it, because yeah, it doesn't seem like it can last for long. Maybe, I mean, perhaps it will last for another half century or whatever, and I hope that maybe in this time there will be some more will from the position of the government, or maybe some private investor will come into play and decide to repair the whole place. We should really preserve the most, I don't know, important pearls that are still left out there, so we still have something to remember. We still have something to be proud of, as it is part of our history. And we also, besides just going to Sharivka initially, parents and I, we wanted to go to another place, to another estate, which unfortunately we were not really able to reach, just because there was barely any road, and it was super hard to go there even by car. Could you imagine that? I'm not even talking about going there with some public transport. It just doesn't exist. Like, unless you want to get your car to be stuck in the mud, you just need to deal with it. You just shouldn't go. And like, the only thing we managed to see from that another estate, which called Natalievka, just the gates that are next to the highway. And for the actual estate, we just weren't really able to reach it, because yeah, we didn't really want to get stuck with no ability to be able to call for help. And I know I'm really coming into kind of a negative thing right now, but I do want to stress that we do have great places to visit. We have great places to show to the world. And all we need to do is take a good care of them. We should be proud of our heritage, and we should be willing to preserve it, not for the whole world, but for us, for the future generations. And this is the way I see we should probably take care of our history. And that's the only way. Thank you all very much for listening. I know it's probably ended on kind of a bit of a negative note, but hey, you know, sometimes we should all take it with a grain of salt. I do believe that Sharivka, nonetheless, is still a great place to visit, and if you'll be able around to be around the Kharkiv, you should definitely go there. It doesn't take that much time to travel, and it's still quite fine to reach that place. You'll be able to see what's left from what used to be a super wealthy estate, but it also has this whole ruin vibe of ruins, you know. So probably there's still something in it. Thank you very much for listening, and maybe you have some more tips which I would love to see in the comments. If you are, I don't know, maybe know some not really popular landmarks, I would be really curious to see if you guys from Ukraine or from any other country, and like you do know that the places, some of the places not really getting much attention, just drop them down in the comments. I'll be so curious to see what is there that is just not having the spotlight on now. Bye.